By now, you've probably heard of the term Metaverse. You know, the concept of a virtual world where you can go anywhere and do anything you want. And I tried walking across a plank in a virtual environment and it blew my mind. And as we've seen it gain more prominence in pop culture, there is the question of what the Metaverse means for society and for individuals as well. I have with me three very esteemed guests, Lucas Lee, Derek Lim, and Simran Tool. And we are going to be exploring certain perspectives and opinions about the Metaverse. But to facilitate the discussion, we have these little things that allow you to disagree or agree with anything that anyone says.
Opinion pedals.
Opinion pedals, yes, I like the name. It's like the equivalent of raising your arm in school.
Okay.
And what we are going to be talking about will be guided by three statements, each of which have been written by a different guest before we started the recording. First statement, the way people are using the term Metaverse is all hype.
I think this is a great premise for our conversation, right? We need to understand, what the metaverse as a concept, right, as a term really is.
To me, the metaverse, I may have a layperson's understanding, but it's cyberspace plus VR. Is that correct?
If you throw a stone and ask anyone here, right, I can tell you, if you ask 10 people, they'll give you 10 different answers. Metaverse as a term was coined by futurism and science fiction, right? They see it as an iteration of the internet, right, where everything becomes like a singular, universal, and immersive and interactive virtual environment. It just so happens that, the virtual headsets is a gateway to that.
So it's a parallel universe accessed by virtual headsets.
And it has to be immersive lah.
Yeah, it has to be immersive, right?
Immersive.
Yeah, because so if we don't, define it that way, right, then it's no different from any mere virtual environments now that we have, right? Like Google Meet or Zoom, that term loses significance.
So Lucas, given that you're neck deep in the space, right, what are your thoughts with regards to what Derek just said?
The thing is, this term, it's thrown around freely. Something that's hype, everybody want to jump into it, even without understanding the whole broad concept of what a metaverse is. So, but I wouldn't say that it's always all bad when it's hype, right? It actually encourages innovation. People start to think, okay, how can I create something that adds value to the human race? How can I create something that's going to change the world, right? So we saw, your Amazon, your Netflix, right, your Google, your Facebook started to change how the way people live. So I wouldn't say that metaverse being hype is a bad thing.
So what actually came first? Facebook's meta or the metaverse? Was the metaverse already something that existed?
Again, this really comes down to what's the definition of a metaverse, right? So to Derek's point, it has to be immersive. But again, this is very debatable. What's the word immersive really actually mean, right? If you look back in RuneScape games like Minecraft, right, Roblox, all this, there's no VR, there's not even AR, but again,
you can get drawn in fully,
you get
right?
drawn into it. I don't think you require AR or VR to make it immersive, right? As long as it falls under what you believe a definition of a metaverse is.
You raise 2 points, right? First, you raise the point that, it being hype is not all that bad. I agree to a certain extent, right? But I also disagree because for any nascent ecosystem, vertical growth is the first and foremost the most important thing. When it's not defined and there's a lot of noise and a lot of people coming in to innovate, 95% of them are actually a lot of noise. Sure, you can see it as innovation, but it's stretching the space, horizontally in a way that will, compromise on a vertical growth, which is important, like I said, for any nascent tech, space. Because you need that baseline level of innovation first. You need to foster that first, right? Before you can actually have proper innovation to begin. So I feel at this point, right, too much noise, honestly, is not the best thing I would say for this space, right? And the second point that I'm going to address, right, is that you said that it's okay to have a loose definition of the metaverse, and you see AR, VR as not part of the metaverse, right? I think that confuses things a lot, right? Because then why is there a need for the term metaverse, right? It's just a virtual environment. It's just digital. It's just digital world, right? The fact that you want to coin a term, an extra term, right? It must have added significance to it. And if it's a lofty goal, if it's an ambitious goal they want to aim for, so be it. But we have to be clear about the difference before we can get there. If we see it as like, okay, we muddle it together with it's Google and Google Meet and Zoom and things like that, it will never go anywhere.
Without hype, why would people even jump in? Why would the brilliant people actually start jumping in? Rather than trying to prevent it from happening, fully embrace it and to attract the right people into the space.
Hype is an empty notion, right? Without the proper infrastructure, like I mentioned.
There's no strong foundation. You're just going to attract all and sundry with all kinds of different ideas. What kind of growth are you going to achieve, right? It's going to be a little bit wild, wild west.
If a hype is overhyped and the foundation doesn't meet the hype, right, it will surely come down. But when it comes down, right, the people who are very profit-driven are already out already. The speculators are out already. Then the companies of real substance start building. All right, to make this metaverse thing really how it's going to change life, how you're going to revolutionize the next phase of internet technology.
Does the lack of a definition actually cause any harm or cause any hindrance?
It can be used as a marketing buzzword or a gimmicky concept, right, that draws people into products that are actually not real products, right? Scams, for lack of a better term. You have the parameters for that.
Back to the point of hype, is it? Without hype, this kind of conversation wouldn't even take place. There wouldn't be interest in this space in the first place. And because of this kind of talks, right, people start to get educated. The more people talk about it, the more it gets properly defined and properly educated. So hype is important for a revolution, technical revolution to actually take place.
That's fair, but I mean, to me, there can be a more systematic way to do it, right? That protects more people.
Clearly, a lot of good points, and I think a lot of passion as well. Which is the interesting thing about things like this, where you have 4 people from different walks of life come together, which kind of means that the metaverse does impact everyone. Let's see, the mysterious scroll. Legislation and regulation may not necessarily make the metaverse safer.
Legislation and regulation, they have an important signaling effect, right? Because it sets out what's the definition of the metaverse, what's right and what's wrong, what's acceptable conduct there and what's not. But to some degree, it will always lag behind what's happening in the real world, right? Legislation takes time to discuss with stakeholders, pass through parliament. It could be a year before an act comes to life, right? But then, of course, in the meantime, things are happening in real life. So I think it's important to send a signal, but we have to look at it together with other forms of, say, education. So one, I think there are a lot of programs out there in schools already, but I think in the home as well. And I think public education, I think what we're planning to do at SHE as well is have a center, that deals with online harms, things that you may encounter online that's not safe. Right, particularly for girls and women, you've got things like sharing of intimate images, online harassment, which if you go into the metaverse takes a whole new layer.
I think it's great that we're touching on this because it's something that most people don't talk about. I think people underestimate, right, the kind of like trauma, and you know best, right, like that they face, right?
It can be very long lasting. So if something bad happens to you in Singapore, you know that you can approach the Singapore Police Force. But if you're in the metaverse, you don't know who the offender is, what country is located in, who owns the platform. If it's Uzbekistan, how are you going to find the owner? Then, the metaverse doesn't have a police force.
Regulation should not be an obstacle or hindrance to innovation. But if, let's say, Singapore wants to position itself as an innovation hub, right, to win in the metaverse race, so it needs to regulate properly such that it gives the opportunity for entrepreneurs to actually go and innovate.
Time is really of the essence. Let's say people, suddenly a trend of cyber stalking online, the harm that is caused is very immediate. You cannot wait 1 year for the legislation to come out.
What I wanted to ask you, Lucas, is for you actually have a company in the space. So what measures are you taking to protect your own users, your own community?
The nature of what we are building, right, it's a geolocation-based metaverse. So it's very similar to like how Pokemon Go does it, all right, but it's blockchain-powered. We are looking at many, many ways to protect. For example, communications. We are looking at one way where we want to limit words communication. The interactive way is such that you can do a hi, smiley face, right. The second thing, we want to limit the dangerous places like sensitive places that you cannot go.
So it's almost like a little set of rules to govern the users. Do you think to have like a very convenient best practice set of community rules that any platform at least should try and consistently apply across the board? So as a user, I know, hey, everywhere I venture, I will generally be facing the same sort of protections and regulation.
Every game is different, and you have contextualized to it, right? It's very hard to have an overarching one.
Well, then best practices is one thing. Then we also have to trust the platforms to then take action.
Yes.
When you report.
Second layer.
Yeah, the second
exactly,
layer.
yeah.
So the enforcement part of the rules needs to take place
But
as well.
first layer, it should be there as well, right? Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah.
Agree.
Okay, so I think we can also all agree that regulation is important, and there is a lot to be regulated. It's a question of when, it's a question of how, but it's also something that we can see coming. Okay. Something very, very broad is a nice way to sum up the discussion. The statement is, the metaverse will make life easier.
Yeah, the metaverse definitely will make life easier. Not only just easier, accessible, more convenient. Let's take, for example, let's say somebody wants to cure cancer. Just an example, right? Where do you have the resources, the labs, the things that's needed to go and cure cancer? But in the metaverse world, it's possible. You can simulate it as many times as you want, right? And then finally, when you really get it ready, you can actually do it in the real world. Right? Same for surgery, right?
If it makes it easier, does it make it better? Because do I really want a surgeon who trained online to operate on me? I'm not so sure unless it basically has the same qualifications and trust built into it that real life systems have. So it may create an opportunity, but I don't know if in the end it's going to be easier.
It can also go through like the same level of rigor that we have in real life. Just that now it's just made more accessible. It's just made more universal. It augments what's really there.
Then what about the human connection, the human-human connection? I mean, we're never going to stop being people. We're never going to stop physically interacting.
Yeah, I can't get a mani-pedi in the metaverse, right?
Exactly.
That's one of the danger of a very successful metaverse. Everybody become over-reliant on the virtual world. I personally think that cannot replace a physical interaction. The experience should be cross-dimensional.
So it really comes down to the individual then to like self-regulate how much time I'm going to spend in the metaverse.
Yep.
Because we know, I think from COVID, right, there's a lot of studies to show that the interpersonal interaction is very important for mental health and well-being. I know my iPhone gives me a report once a week, but really I don't think that changes my habits at all.
And it really comes down to the intention of each company, right? So take for example, my company, right? What I was inspired from was actually Pokemon Go. But Pokemon Go showed me another light that how technology can bring people together. For me, I didn't get to meet my secondary school friends, and Pokemon Go allowed me to meet my friend in East Coast Park just to go and catch Pokemon Go. It gives people even more motivation to really go out there, interact with their friends and their family, but at the same time, there's the virtual aspect of it. So that's what I mean by the cross-dimensional experience.
So is it something that you think we should also share with, say, the older generation, like my parents,
Yep.
right? Already telling them about social media has been a monumental task. Now to tell them about the metaverse, or is it something, okay, for the future generations?
This takes time. Even for WhatsApp, right? When I was so against using the iPhone back then because there's no button, and then after that, suddenly the girl I like started using WhatsApp. Okay, I have to go and figure out how to go and use this WhatsApp thing, right? So that I can communicate with her.
So when my mom starts nagging me in the metaverse, that's when we know there's full adoption already.
Yes.
As tech progresses, the tech shouldn't have to wait for you to catch up, right? But it shouldn't be hindered, right? Because change is only constant for societies.
I think when WhatsApp first came around, I felt so overwhelmed. I'm like, I need to reply to all these things so immediately. It was quite stressful, but then now, right, you got so used to it in a matter of years.
That over-reliance. Don't know if you all watched the movie Ready Player One.
Yes, I did,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that movie.
Ready Player One gives a very realistic kind of like scenario of what happens if a metaverse gets very, very, very successful, right? People just go into rubbish places, right? Put on their VR headset and then go into the Oasis world. I'm against this kind of scenario. I think metaverse should not ever replace human interaction, right? So I believe if the intent is always about purely profit, right, then we may get to that state.
In that movie, right, I think some of them were actually physically disabled. Oasis gave them a new lease of life. They were able to run, to walk. This in itself, right, is something the real world can never have, right? Unless you have a great leap forward in terms of tech, helping them walk in certain ways, right?
I don't really know how I feel about that because it kind of actually makes them reject what they really are, which is fully whole actually. Just they may not be fully able, but it may actually encourage normalization of ableism.
I'm a Web3 researcher now, right? But I don't know if you know, but before this, I was a GP teacher and I spoke to a lot of the students there, and a lot of them don't really have an identity, a sense of self. And something like that, right, I feel like can be really beneficial for the mental health because you can actually go into a world without any limitations. You may end up discovering yourself there.
I run a thrice-a-week podcast, so we have done about 330 episodes, each about 1 hour long. We have enough content there that shows my personality and shows my thoughts that someone can create a fake me and be able to comment on everyday issues. And I think that is something that is also a conversation to be had.
So I think at this point, I just want to throw a challenge, right, to think about, is to push yourself to think about the metaverse, right? Take for example, coders, right? Let's say right now you need to debug a server, right? Instead of, let's say, debugging it using dashboards, right? You actually go into a metaverse, a virtual environment, right? The server is a building, right? Then the bug is a red color ship or something. Then you just go and take the bug, right? And then you pass it on to the next stage, which requires more skill, but then at least you move up in that. You may think it's fantastical, but it's actually happening now, right? So ProtectWise, right, is this company, cybersecurity company that actually does that. They let their employees go into the metaverse to actually debug. There's Hong Kong International Airport as well. They have a digital twin, right, that enables their employees to use a metaverse, right, to track user flow. If that's the direction we're heading to, right, where the metaverse is very immersive, then I think it's a very lofty dream, but it's one that can really move humanity forward.
I mean, it's some way it's like the evolution of websites or the internet. It started off, just command prompts.
Yeah.
And then you have a user interface. So that's like the metaverse equivalent of a user interface.
It's something that I hope can happen. Right? I hope, because like I said, if the metaverse wants to be the metaverse, right, like its concept on its own, right, then it must value add above and beyond, way above and beyond the digital like landscape we have now.
Okay, that all sounds very optimistic, which is a great way to end this discussion. We've spoken about regulation, education, and now we almost end with the dream of the metaverse. You can find out more by exploring books such as Reality Plus, Virtual Worlds and the Problems of Philosophy, and The Metaverse and How It Will Revolutionize Everything. You can find these at your nearest library or the NLB mobile app. And if you want to find out even more info, you can check out the Read to Be Sure website. And now to end off with a question to you. Does the metaverse make life easier? Please let us know your thoughts and comments in the section below because we want to hear from you.